Welcome to True Reddit Reads, where real-life stories are told in the voices of those who have been silent for far too long. Today you're about to hear a story that seemed ordinary on the surface between me and my girlfriend Sarah, but was threatened by the one person she trusted most, her own brother. You'll witness how someone who claims to protect his sister can turn concern into obsession, manipulate love, and even attack someone else's career. This is a story of lies, jealousy, subtle manipulation, and above all, how truth and trust eventually prevail. Let's begin and remember, sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a stranger at all. Want to query soft hands on the golf course? I've never been the type to enjoy these informal interviews from a partner's family, but this time there was no way around it. Sarah and I had been dating for 4 months when she finally hesitantly invited me to the golf club where her brother Trevor was a long-standing member. She smiled, trying to reassure me as she adjusted my belt in the parking lot. Just so you know, he's a bit overprotective of me ever since our parents passed. My heart was hammering in my chest. I knew that if I didn't survive this test from Trevor, marriage would never happen. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. Sarah had been burned badly by her ex, David. He had pretended to be poor, earned her trust, and then drained her bank accounts. Because of that, Trevor was always suspicious that any man who came near his sister was only after her money. What he didn't know was that I was the CEO of a company specializing in private jet services. But after what had happened in the past, I'd learned one hard lesson. Money changes how people see you. So I kept quiet, dressed, simply no flashy watch, no showing off at all. When we arrived, Trevor was already at the driving range. He scanned me from head to toe, and I knew that look, the kind that sizes you up purely with a glance. Trevor was decked out in Ralph Lauren from head to toe like the brand had personally sponsored him. His handshake was like steel and intentional squeeze to assert dominance, if you catch my drift. After that bone-crushing handshake, he dropped a sarcastic line, soft hands, like someone who's never lifted anything in their life. I chuckled lightly, not even able to respond, before he followed up by asking if I even knew how to hold a golf club, or if Sarah would have to teach me like a child. During my first tee-off, Sarah and Trevor rode the golf cart while I was told to walk for exercise. For the first 3 holes, Trevor kept patting my shoulder, adjusting my stance like an unwilling coach, then whispered to Sarah over my head that good golf lessons these days are expensive, especially when your boyfriend clearly can't afford it. My phone kept buzzing calls from the executive team. I switched it to Do Not Disturb, but Trevor noticed. "Put the phone down," he said, grinning like he was about to deliver a punchline. Or is DoorDash calling you back to make deliveries? While Sarah was focusing on her putt, Trevor pulled out his phone, scrolling through pictures of successful men club members, and claimed that they were all single. And in the way he emphasized it all, very interested in Sarah. Sarah tried to change the subject, but Trevor grabbed her hand and said, "You chose him because you were scared. David hurt you, so now you pick someone easy to control." He looked me dead in the eye. No offense, he added, but Sarah deserves someone on her level. I said nothing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than arguing, but Trevor saw my silence as an opportunity. He stepped closer, patted my hand lightly, then squeezed my bicep with disdain. "This is supposed to protect anyone," he said. "Can't even open a jar of pickles, I bet." I swallowed my frustration. Not because I was afraid, but because Sarah was there, and I knew she was trying her hardest to prevent the 2 most important men in her life from clashing on the golf course. I didn't even realize how tightly I was clenching my jaw. But Trevor circled me like a predator, lifted my chin with his fingers, and spoke as if passing judgment. "Sarah is the only one willing to look at you a second time, and that's only because she's mentally scarred from losing her parents." I just stood there, taking it, saying nothing, but inside my head, one thing was clear. This match wasn't ending here, and I was not going to lose. Chapter 2. when protecting your sister becomes a campaign of sabotage. I thought it was over after that day, until Trevor accidentally put a call on speaker, and everyone on the golf course heard my operations manager yelling into the phone about a CEO furious over losing his usual private jet slot. The name Hayes Aviation rang out across the green, and I didn't need to say another word. Trevor froze in place. The smug expression from minutes before had drained from his face, his eyes darting back and forth as he tried to process the truth crashing down on him. Then he stammered, "Aviation. But that can't be. You're not." And Sarah, still caught off guard, suddenly paused. She remembered the money to pay off the house after their parents died. The anonymous funds no one knew the source of. She turned to me, almost whispering, "That's you." I just nodded. And at that moment, I thought Trevor understood. That I wasn't a gold digger, not another David. That I genuinely loved Sarah. But it turned out for someone like Trevor, having his cards exposed was a blow to his ego, fiercer than anything else. 3 days later, I was in the Hayes Aviation hangar reviewing the maintenance schedule when my assistant Catherine walked in. She was holding a stack of handwritten notes, her brow furrowed. "Someone's been calling nonstop since the beginning of the week," she said. "Never leaves a name. Just says there's an urgent flight safety issue, but every time we ask for details, they hang up." I flipped through the notes. Each one was a different phone number, untraceable. And the moment I recognized the pattern, I knew. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the first step in a campaign. I'd seen this before, competitors playing dirty, trying to ruin reputations with anonymous rumors, but this time the timing was too precise, too targeted, too personal. Then a message from Sarah came through. She asked, "Why didn't you tell me about the money from the start?" I nearly dropped my phone. "Trevor." He was already in motion. A few hours later, another message. He says, "I'm being tricked again, that you're just like David. Hiding money, pretending to be poor, manipulative." I called her. No answer. Next message, "I need time to think." And then it began. Aviation forums flooded with anonymous posts. Posts that appeared to come from industry insiders questioning the safety of Hayes Aviation. But each post contained errors, subtle, deliberate mistakes designed to make the writer seem professional, yet flawed. A classic tactic: where there's smoke, there must be fire. Then another call from my CEO, this time reporting a surprise safety inspection. Questions about maintenance logs, pilot training procedures, and whether anything had been cut corners. I knew these questions couldn't come from an outsider. Only someone familiar with internal operations could hit these exact pressure points. And then Jonathan, my CEO, remembered a small detail. The inspector had mentioned a college roommate who had introduced him to Hayes Aviation. A faintly familiar name, but Trevor had once bragged about a law school classmate in aviation. Trevor. It was him. I texted Sarah, trying to stay calm, but my phone remained silent. Then one evening, Emma, Sarah's best friend, called. Her voice was cold. Trevor had gone to her house carrying printed copies of my company's financial statements, delivering a 3-hour lecture claiming I was deliberately hiding information to manipulate the situation. He said I had studied Sarah's family, knew every tragedy, and calculated each move to appear flawless. I just sat there in my own office, feeling drained of every ounce of energy. This was no longer about a brother being cautious. This was a war, and Trevor had declared it. Chapter 3. Slowly tearing apart like boiling a frog. I used to think manipulation only happened in movies, the kind where some villain lurks in the shadows, pulling strings, threatening chaos. I was wrong. Real manipulation sometimes comes wrapped in gentle smiles, harmless-sounding words, and I'm just worried about my sister's sentiments coated in affection. Emma called me after that. Her voice was cautious but firm. "Trevor talks like you're a pre-written villain. And he has proof. Charts, documents, printed pages. Charts, documents, apparently." Trevor had spent days mapping out my relationship with Sarah. Hearing this, I just laughed, not a joyful laugh, but the dry kind that says, "Wow, he really has nothing better to do." He'd recorded every time I said we should save money every dinner Sarah paid for, even comparing the value of my birthday gifts to the cost of her house. Then he presented all of it to Sarah like a fraud investigation. Don't you see? He's calculated everything. Every move with you, every sign points to him being another David. Sarah is smart, but she's also someone who's been deeply hurt by betrayal before. Trevor knew this. He used her old wounds as a lever, dredging up memories and pushing her into suspicion of everything, especially me. She didn't argue with me, but she started keeping her distance. Replies to my texts slowed down. Her voice on calls became hollow. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd only say, "I'm fine. I just need time to think." I knew something was wrong, and I knew who was behind it. Meanwhile, HR flagged a pattern: strange messages sent to young employees pretending to inquire about the company. Has the CEO ever pressured training schedules? Is the company culture transparent? Does he ever brag about his personal achievements? On the surface, harmless questions. But when I had it trace them, all accounts were created days apart from different IPs, but the writing style, eerily similar. It hit me. Trevor was playing a long game. I wasn't the only target anymore. He was targeting everyone around me, painting a picture where I was hypocritical, arrogant, controlling, deceptive. One morning, the barista at my usual coffee spot pulled me aside. "Your girlfriend's brother, he came by yesterday at 6 a.m., asking where you usually sit, who you meet, any business partners." I smiled, but it was a cold, sharp smile. Trevor wasn't just fabricating stories. He was stalking me. Later that afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. Attached was a photo of me at the golf practice last week, taken from a hidden angle. Across the image was the word liar, in bright red, cheaply photoshopped, the kind of thing a middle schooler could make. That photo, what I would later discover, had begun circulating in a local business Facebook group, captioned, "If he can deceive his girlfriend, can he deceive his partners too?" I didn't react. I didn't respond. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every post, every message, every anonymous call. Trevor wanted a silent war fine. I wouldn't just react blindly. I would expose him with the one thing he feared the most, the truth. Chapter 4, The Open Assault. I used to think Trevor was just a protective, slightly obsessive older brother. But after that week, I had to reconsider. He was dangerous. Not dangerous in a violent smash and break kind of way. Dangerous in the sense that he knew exactly how to wound someone precisely enough to hurt, but without leaving visible blood. After the liar photo went public, things spiraled out of control. One of our biggest clients, someone who chartered jets for art auctions, called directly, I heard Hayes Aviation, is under internal investigation for falsifying pilot training records. Is that true? I paused for 2 seconds, not out of shock, but anger. It didn't exist. None of it. But the rumor planted somewhere was spreading at a terrifying speed. I knew Trevor was behind it. The story matched everything I'd heard from Emma, Sarah, and the employees who had been contacted. Posts on aviation forums were multiplying, dozens of legitimate accounts suddenly chiming in. One post asked, "Has anyone noticed Hayes Aviation pilots being underqualified?" Another, written like a seasoned technician, not trying to slander, but I heard they skip routine maintenance checks. All anonymous, all carefully written, just vague enough to avoid lawsuits, just precise enough to sow doubt. My security team and I began collecting evidence. Every post, every IP, every comment, and then we noticed it: similar phrasing, sentence structures, even punctuation marks. One person, multiple identities, a coordinated campaign. Sarah remained distant, but I started hearing her repeat phrases as if memorized. "Don't you see you've hidden too much from me? I feel like I'm being led. Do you really love me? Or just want to feel like a hero?" I didn't blame her. I could see the fear in Sarah's eyes, the fear of being deceived again. Trevor was dredging up her painful history with David, twisting every action of mine into a replica of that past betrayal. Then something happened that made it clear Trevor wasn't just a meddling brother anymore. He was an organized saboteur. One of my most experienced pilots, 10 years with the company, came into the office, closed the door, and said, "Someone contacted me privately, asked if you'd ever forced a shortened training schedule, asked about salaries, paperwork, maintenance records." I asked, "Who was it?" He frowned. No name given, but sounded like they were looking for weaknesses to exploit. At that moment, I stopped doubting. Trevor was building a fabricated dossier on me, both personal and professional, and releasing it piece by piece, a drip feed torture. I started losing sleep, not from fear, from fury. I had done nothing wrong. I hadn't lied to anyone. I wasn't David, and I had saved Trevor's family without ever asking for a thank you. Yet here I was, watching him trample everything I'd built. And Sarah, the woman I loved, was caught in the undertow, unable to tell reality from fiction. One evening at home, I received a message from a longtime client. "Sorry to ask directly, but is it true? You manipulated your girlfriend to gain access to her finances?" I threw my phone onto the table, leaned back in my chair. I was used to pressure. As a CEO, I'd faced crises before. But this was the first time I felt like I was drowning in a swamp I never entered. And the one shoveling mud in my face was the brother of the woman I loved. Chapter 5: When the Company Becomes a Target. I used to think all of this only affected Sarah and our relationship, but Trevor quickly proved me wrong. Nothing was off limits, not even the company I had built with blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. One morning, our COO, Jonathan, burst into my office, face flushed. A safety inspector just showed up and demanded to review all maintenance records. "Did anyone request this report?" I frowned. The questions the inspector asked were precise. Only someone with inside knowledge could ask that. There was no longer any doubt Trevor had escalated. From planting doubt in Sarah, he had moved on to striking directly at the company's reputation and credibility. The very next day, a major client called. I heard, "There have been safety complaints." Are these true? I wanted to say no, it's all fabricated, but I didn't rush. I knew any hasty response could be twisted by Trevor into more evidence against me. He would turn my words against me, feeding the illusion of deceit. Meanwhile, Sarah remained silent. She wasn't replying to messages. I could see the worry in her eyes every time I tried to explain, every time I mentioned the company. Trevor had succeeded. He had planted doubt, making her question not only my trustworthiness, but her own judgment. I began recording every detail, every call, every message, every comment on aviation forums. I saved everything, not just for defense, but to protect the company's reputation and the truth for Sarah. One afternoon, a veteran pilot, 10 years with the company, reported, "Someone unknown has been asking detailed questions about maintenance pilot training and safety procedures. They're acting like they're gathering evidence to bring you down." I nodded. I knew exactly what this meant: a calculated, organized campaign. Trevor was no longer just a worried older brother. He was turning the company into a hostage to manipulate Sarah. The pressure escalated. Clients kept calling to verify claims. Our account manager reported that critical contracts were being threatened by these false reports. Partners began to hesitate. I knew that every decision, every word I spoke was under Trevor's microscope. Every action could become his next weapon of defamation. His control, which had started with Sarah, was now spreading across the entire company. I sat back and took a deep breath. No panic, no impulsive retaliation. I understood this clearly. Any rash move would only reinforce his narrative. Everything had to be planned step by step, as methodically as he had orchestrated his attack. I began outlining a strategy: document every piece of evidence regarding anonymous complaints, verify all information, and prepare legal files if necessary. Maintain discreet contact with trusted employees so they knew who the allies were. In my head, I kept repeating one line: "If he wants to turn the company into a target, I will turn the truth into a weapon." But I also worried about Sarah. Every time I saw her confused or anxious, The pressure doubled. Not only did I have to protect the company, I had to shield her from Trevor's psychological manipulation, and I knew this was only the beginning of the battle. Chapter 6. Counterattack from Allies. After days of chaos, I realized one crucial thing: I wasn't fighting this alone. Emma, Sarah's closest friend, began to reveal Trevor's true nature. She messaged me. "He's lying. Everything he's told Sarah about you is completely false." I didn't need to ask for more. I had already seen how Trevor manipulated everyone around him, from Sarah to friends, colleagues, even people he barely knew. Now Emma was the first to push back. Sarah was still confused, but I knew she needed others to see the truth before she could fully trust me again. Emma began meticulously documenting everything: messages, emails, anonymous forum posts, even instances where Trevor had admitted to lying in private conversations. It wasn't just Emma. Several long-term employees, people who had witnessed my work firsthand, began speaking up. I have always been transparent in my dealings. I've never cut corners on maintenance or pushed pilots beyond safe limits. I've always supported employees' growth, never manipulated them. They posted public comments on forums, wrote letters to clients and partners, clarifying the information Trevor had twisted. Each testimony hit his fabricated narrative like a precise, undeniable blow. Trevor began showing cracks of frustration. The posts, messages, and testimonials from Emma employees and Sarah's friends slowly chipped away at the confidence he had once carried. That swagger, the self-assured aura he flaunted on the golf course, began to crumble. And it didn't stop there. Sarah started noticing inconsistencies herself. Everything Trevor claimed about my actions and the evidence he presented to her didn't match reality. He had exploited her painful past to manipulate her emotions, but his actions were now clearly calculated, contrived, and lacking any real basis. Watching Trevor lose control was satisfying, not out of revenge, but because the truth was finally emerging. For the first time in days, I saw Sarah exhale slightly, her eyes losing some of their tension. She didn't trust me completely yet, but she began questioning whether her brother's words could truly be accurate. Was he genuinely protecting her, or was he manipulating her for his own satisfaction? It was a turning point. The people around me, Emma, the employees, loyal friends, became a righteous counterforce. One by one, they exposed the truth. Each piece of evidence, every first-hand account, confirmed that I had done nothing wrong. And Trevor began to see his carefully constructed campaign unraveling, even as he tried to maintain the image of the protective older brother. I stood back, letting it unfold. Every piece of proof Emma or an employee presented, every story retold by a friend, struck at the carefully curated facade Trevor had built. For the first time in many days, I felt a sense of relief, subtle but unmistakable. Trevor's dirty campaign was being resisted, and the person I loved finally had a chance to see the truth with her own eyes. Chapter 7. The Family Showdown. We knew it was time for a direct confrontation. A family meeting was arranged at Sarah's aunt's house, a place where everyone could witness the truth and where Trevor couldn't easily slip away. Trevor arrived last, clutching a stack of photocopied documents, exuding the confidence of someone preparing to deliver a courtroom presentation. He launched into a rehearsed tirade, painting me as calculating, manipulative, and exploiting Sarah and everyone around her. Every point was numbered, accompanied by printed images and annotations, all crafted to appear irrefutable. I took a deep breath and stayed calm. No need to argue hastily. I knew every word I said could be twisted into evidence against me. Instead, I laid out a clear timeline. Hayes Aviation Company, records date of founding, first contracts, images, receipts, and documentation proving the anonymous payment towards Sarah's house debt, lists of employees willing to testify to my transparency and professional integrity. Everything was presented sequentially, each piece fitting like a puzzle. While Trevor fumbled with his explanations, family members began exchanging skeptical glances. One moment completely shifted the room's energy: Trevor's fabricated evidence of a plane accident. He attempted to claim that Hayes Aviation existed when Sarah's parents had their accident, insinuating that I had some involvement. But just minutes of checking the records revealed the truth: my company was founded 3 years after their deaths. Licenses, taxes, official filings all confirmed the timeline. Trevor's eyes twitched. His hands shook as he tried to produce another sheet of paper, but no one believed him anymore. Sarah exhaled quietly, looking at me with a mix of surprise and cautious relief. She was finally beginning to see the truth I had tried in vain to explain. Family members, from aunts and uncles to cousins, started asking pointed questions. If you truly helped Sarah, why create these documents? Why monitor her all this time? Trevor faltered. His confident tone shifted to panic. He began offering circular explanations, contradicting himself, but all my evidence was too clear. The more he tried to construct his narrative, the more glaring his obsession and deceit became. Trevor's wife sat beside him, initially stunned, but gradually realizing the extent of her husband's controlling obsession. She looked at him with a mix of fear and disappointment. Trevor struggled one last time, insisting everything was for Sarah's protection, but the truth was undeniable. This was manipulation, control, and an obsession that had become harmful. Finally, Sarah's aunt concluded, "We need to see the truth, not fear or lies. And now we can see clearly who truly cares and who is manipulating." The room fell silent. Trevor's shoulders slumped, his head hanging as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. There was nowhere to hide, no more allies to lean on. Everyone had witnessed his behavior firsthand. For Sarah, it was a moment of liberation. She held my hand tight, yet relieved, as if silently saying, "We can finally see the light." And I knew that after all the days of doubt and control, we had reached the turning point. Every lie Trevor had told had been exposed right in front of the family. Chapter 8. Total Collapse. After the family meeting, it became clear that Trevor had completely lost control. Not just a fleeting disappointment, but a total collapse of his reputation, his influence, even the authority he once thought he had. Trevor's wife, having endured long enough, finally intervened decisively. She looked at him with a coldness I had never seen before and said bluntly, "If you don't go to therapy and change, I will not stand by and watch you destroy this family any longer." Trevor was speechless. He knew she wasn't bluffing. Her resolve was stronger than any rebuttal Sarah or I had offered before. He glanced around at everyone, then at Sarah, eyes filled with anger, frustration, and disbelief. I stood silently beside her. I didn't want to celebrate, not because I feared what he might do next, but because witnessing this victory without losing anything felt surreal. I still had my safety, my integrity, and Sarah's love intact. Yet seeing a man who had once held himself so proudly reduced to this, it was almost pitiful. Even Trevor's business partners began to step back. They saw that, while he was obsessively trying to sabotage me, his own work was crumbling. Important contracts, delayed meetings, missed company strategy, falling apart. Some confronted him directly. "You need to choose family or revenge. You can't have both." That was the final blow. Trevor lowered his head, shoulders slumping. Gone was the confident swagger, the proud golf course persona. He had lost total control over Sarah, over the family, over his career. I knew that now he would have to begin therapy or risk losing everything permanently. His wife was resolute, setting boundaries that made it clear there would be no tolerance for controlling, obsessive behavior ever again. I stood beside Sarah. She gripped my hand tightly, relief washing over her like escaping a long nightmare. We had survived this day, not through violence or revenge, but through truth and patience. From the outside, Trevor still looked like a man defeated, but the important thing was that he no longer had the power to harm Sarah or interfere with my company. His total collapse was undeniable proof. Obsession, manipulation, and lies will eventually be exposed. We knew that from this point on, every step Sarah took would belong to her free, independent, and no longer bound by the destructive obsession of a misguided brother. And I, exhausted but relieved, felt a weight lift from my chest. The truth always prevails. Stars. Recovery and rebuilding trust. After Trevor's complete collapse and his mandatory therapy, the atmosphere finally lightened. Sarah could breathe without the weight of suspicion and pressure her brother had imposed, and I knew that the next step, perhaps the most important, was helping her reclaim trust and simultaneously strengthening our relationship. We spent countless hours talking not just about the events that had unfolded, but about the wounds we both carried from the past. I explained every decision I had made since the start of our relationship, from keeping my role as CEO private to the reason I had quietly assisted her family after her parents' death. But words alone weren't enough. I backed everything up with transparency, opening all company records, proving that every action I took was ethical, responsible, and above board. Sarah listened slowly, deliberately. Gradually, her eyes softened, her smiles returned, and the traces of anxiety on her face faded. She began to realize she could trust me again. There was no rush, no pressure, just time and the undeniable power of truth restoring confidence. We began organizing our shared life. Preparing for a pivotal change, Sarah decided to move in with me. This step was more than an expression of love. It was her assertion of autonomy, a deliberate separation from any lingering control Trevor might have sought to exert. Meanwhile, my company regained stability. Clients, employees, and the wider aviation community had witnessed my unwavering transparency and ethics even under Trevor's attacks. Positive reviews, long-standing employee testimonials, and loyal client support flooded forums and industry channels, dismantling every false accusation and rumor that had circulated. Sarah and I also began planning our wedding. We chose to keep it small, intimate, celebrating only with those who had supported and protected us from the beginning. Emma was honored as our maid of honor, a symbol that the people who stood by us would always be part of our journey. Trevor. He no longer had any influence over our decisions. He was immersed in therapy, attempting to change, but the controlling bond he had tried to maintain with Sarah had been irreversibly broken. We established firm boundaries, contact only when absolutely necessary, always guided by respect. Looking back, I realized that surviving this crisis had made us wiser, more compassionate, and more deeply connected. Our relationship had grown beyond love. It had become partnership, trust, and resilience in the face of adversity. And finally, as Sarah held my hand in our new home, I understood that we had endured and overcome everything: manipulation, deceit, and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Everything we had rebuilt: our life, our love, our trust, stood on a foundation of truth, sincerity, and unwavering integrity. Solid, unbreakable. Chapter 10. Endings and New Beginnings. A year had passed since the tension, the fear, and the heartbreak. We stood at the threshold of a new chapter. Trevor had completed his therapy, beginning to acknowledge the obsession and controlling behavior that had defined his actions. He wrote a letter addressed to Sarah and me, admitting his actions, his envy, and his unhealthy fixation on our relationship. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, a taking of responsibility enough to show that the first steps toward change had begun. Sarah read the letter over and over, then carefully placed it in a drawer. Not to forgive immediately, but as a testament the truth always remains. And the love she had for me, stronger than lies or manipulation, would remain unshaken. Our wedding preparations continued, quiet, intimate, meaningful. Surrounded only by those who truly supported us, Emma family members who had finally seen the truth, colleagues, and those who had witnessed our integrity and efforts. The guest list was short, but every single person held loyalty and love in their hearts. Sarah chose Emma as her maid of honor, a reminder that our journey had not only overcome personal challenges, but it also revealed the value of genuine, trustworthy relationships. Everything unfolded deliberately, carefully, but each moment was saturated with significance, with gratitude and connection. Trevor, he had no control, no opportunity to manipulate. We enforced strict boundaries, communication only when necessary, and always with mutual respect. His path was his own now, a slow, demanding journey of self-awareness, patience, and real change. My company, Hayes Aviation, thrived despite every attempt Trevor had made to sabotage it. Clients remained loyal employees, stayed committed, and the aviation community observed firsthand the transparency, ethics, and resilience we maintained. Testimonials and accounts of my professionalism spread widely, dispelling every false rumor he had tried to propagate. And finally, Sarah and I were married. A ceremony simple in appearance, but rich in love, trust, and gratitude for those who had stood by us. It was an ending I had always hoped for, not through vengeance, but through truth, integrity, and enduring love. Standing beside Sarah, watching her smile, I realized something: every challenge, every manipulation, every difficulty we had faced had only made us stronger. We had learned to stand firm, protect each other, and build a future on honesty, a foundation unshakable by anyone. And Trevor, he remained on his journey of self-control, but the boundaries we established made one thing clear: no one, no matter how close, has the right to destroy another person's life or love. We closed this chapter with growth, trust reinforced, and a relationship stronger than ever. The trials were behind us, leaving only truth, freedom, and genuine happiness. And that's the full story, from the doubts, manipulation, and sabotage to the moment the truth came to light and true love ultimately prevailed. Sarah and I overcame the challenges, rebuilt trust, and proved that honesty, patience, and integrity are always stronger than any scheme. Trevor, who once thought he had control over everything, finally had to face his own actions and begin the journey of change. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Reddit Reads so you won't miss the next emotionally charged, suspenseful, and satisfying real-life story. And remember, sometimes the person you think is there to protect you is the one testing your courage and resilience. But the truth always finds its way.